Yeah, so we're very happy to have a special guest. He's actually been with us before. He's a friend of the pod. He's also the co-host of his own podcast, which is a pretty great one, which probably many of you are aware of. It's called Know Your Enemy. And for those of you who don't know, we'll include a link to it in the show notes. So our guest is Sam Adler-Bell. And the reason we wanted to have Sam on is because Demir and I have been thinking a lot about the future of the left. But there
Well,
was
you've been
also
thinking about the future of the left. I've just been thinking about the future, man.
yeah, right. But the future of the left is tied to the future more generally.
That's true. True.
Yeah,
Technically true.
technically true.
That is banally true.
Banally true.
But Sam also caught our attention because he had a very controversial tweet a few weeks ago, which we won't focus too much time on, but it's kind of a funny tweet. And
You can talk about my tweets as much as you want.
So this is right after July 4th, the day after July 4th, which is a day of gratitude and joy for many Americans, but apparently not all Americans. And Sam Adler-Bell felt that it might be appropriate to rain on the parade and be negative about America. So I'll just mention.
I got your back, Sam. Don't let this guy bully you.
So I'll just read his tweet and then we can kind of take it from there. So Sam, you said, quote, "Loving one's country is a pathetic and embarrassing ordeal. One should do it only against his better judgment. America, being so straightforwardly despicable, pitifully sensitive, and desperate for approval, reveals the perversity and indignity of nationalism. In this way, we are a light among nations." I love that. Obviously, you're being playful and somewhat facetious here.
Being arch.
Being arch, indeed. But maybe let's just start with that, about your feelings about America, because I'm as listeners will know, I'm someone who believes that it's possible to be both left-wing and patriotic. I think there's a way for us to do both, and we shouldn't concede that ground to the right. That when you see American flags now, unfortunately, people associate that with the Republican Party, with the right wing, when we should be able to say, as folks on the center left or left, that, we're proud of this country too. Here are the reasons. And, obviously we'll do it in a different way than the right. But anyway, Sam, tell us what you were thinking with that comment.
I mean, I think I was just having fun, but I do think, obviously, from a strategic standpoint, it's totally irresponsible for the left to abandon the symbols of this country and the useful parts of its past for the purpose of winning majorities and establishing a hegemony that comports with our vision of the good. I mean, I would never advise, if a candidate that I was working for or supportive of said what I said in that tweet, I would say, "You're a fucking idiot. Never say that." But I'm luckily not a political candidate, nor even a political advisor or strategist. I was just speaking from my own personal relationship with this country. And I think, I don't know how you guys took it, but I did mean that I do love this country. I just think I do so in a, ironical and sort of embarrassed way. I mean, I don't feel an enormous amount of pride in it. But I do love it. I do love it very much. But so there's a distinction, obviously, between the role of political strategist or politician and, gadfly or even public intellectual. I mean, one thing that does bother me, I think patriotism is a very good thing, or can be a very beautiful thing. I find compulsory patriotism to be almost always a bad thing and something that I really resent. I think also a part of it for me, I was thinking about this today, I think a part of it is that I'm 36, so my kind of experience of coming into adulthood was during the Bush years, and I very much I think that my understanding of American patriotism, and in particular, the compulsion to be patriotic, even if one doesn't feel it, was forged in the post 9/11 years, where it really dominated our political and cultural life for a long time, in a way that, as a teenager, I really hated being told what to do about anything, but certainly being told that I needed to love this country at that time, and while we were doing the things on the world stage that I resented, had left a lasting imprint on my personality, I guess. I also think there's and I'm saying a lot of things, we could talk about each of them, but I also think there's a thing in American intellectual life where somehow everybody is supposed to be the PR person for their personal political brand. And I feel like when people react really negatively to a person like me saying it's embarrassing to love America, they're reacting to me as if I am a politician or a political strategist. And I do think there's a difference. There should be a difference in the role of an intellectual and the role of a partisan to some degree. And I do, I'm kind of protective of that distinction. And I think in other countries, that distinction is a little bit more, live. It just seems like all the time people are doing discourse about how we should talk.
Yeah.
For the sake of achieving our political ends, instead of just saying what they really think, which I think is something that I try to keep being able to do, even as I do think, as I said, of course, socialist politicians should definitely be patriotic and express their enthusiasm for their political program in patriotic terms.
I mean, let me just jump in here because, the thing that you said there, though, it's like, how did I react?
How'd you react?
It reminded me how weird the United States is, and exactly the way you described, and even in the tweet you said about well, again, this both this sort of sense of the need for approval and also the need for approval from its own citizens, and it has to do, again, I think, because how you want to call it, like creedal nation, I don't know, all these sort of debates about that. But
there's a sense that it's tenuous a little bit, American identity. Well,
exactly, but largely because nationalism's a weird fit for America. I was born in Yugoslavia, but in Croatia, so I cheered for the Croatian team, and I did it with blood curdling nationalism in my blood. It's just the idea of having to express publicly love for the country is a weird American compulsion. I think most people are more like, oh, I'm Egyptian. Oh, well, so it goes. I'm born that way, and there's nothing I can do about it. And so there is something very American about it. I don't know, Shadi, you're Egyptian.
Well, I actually don't really see myself as Egyptian.
No, I know you don't.
That's part of the thing.
Because in fact, you're not.
Yeah, right. In fact, I'm not. Yeah, I mean, although I would say that I do have Egyptian American friends who are much more proud of their Egyptian identity. I mean, it's a longer story as to why I feel complex about that background, but it's also a question of what does it even really mean to be Egyptian? It's not tied to any sense of greater ideals or idealism. Egypt is not a missionary state. It's not an ideological state where America is. So I think it means something to love America in a way that it doesn't really mean as much to love Egypt.
Sure, Shadi, but I mean, even there you said it though, right? Like Egyptian identity. I didn't say identity. You're born in the country. It's not your identity. That's again like an ugly newfangled sort of, I don't know, American idea here that it's my Egyptian identity versus my American identity versus my Jewish identity versus my Croatian identity. That's the kind of gobbledygook that all of this is about, no one should be talking about identity. And patriotism seems to fill this role for Americans or something like that. But it's bad language, I think.
Yeah, but what's so bad about American identity, saying that one has an identity play that out for me, Demir, what your objection is.
I guess all I'm saying is it's what takes the place of actual, the default for most of the rest of the world, which is blood and soil, sort of like I'm from here and therefore I'm from here. It's like a syllogism, right? Or tautology rather than syllogism. It's just a straight up tautology. I am from here and therefore I am from here. And there's just like, so it's an American invention, this whole the concept of identity, and it's, you know, an
Which
innovation.
is a good one. That's precisely the point.
But yeah, again, I mean, we've had like plenty of headaches around it in the last few years, I'd say, and like it's not just purely a good one. So, you know, insofar as that it's not exactly knitting us together right now, it's maybe not the best one, but it exists. I think it's stupid to say that it's, you know, just because it's an American invention that like it doesn't exist. It's real, and you know, we've willed it into being in a lot of ways, and so here we are.
I think it is one of those things, like a lot of things, where when something's a little flimsy or feeble or enfeebled, people are over invest in it, over cathect to an identity that feels imperiled or like incomplete, you know. So when you have like you know, like, I don't know, like Italian Americans who are like, I'm so Italian, you know, it's
Right.
like, well, because they don't really feel that way entirely. And so, and I think, I mean, certainly that happens with Jews, and it's like this thing that's a little bit ersatz has to be like overperformed and, you know, perhaps become like more politically salient because it doesn't have the tautological obvious truth undergirding, you know, its expression or whatever.
Yeah. Well, one
I
thing
think that's true of the patriotism thing too. I mean, it's like creedal nationalism, you know, it's like, it's this thing that has had to be cobbled together, and that has had to change over time to accommodate new sorts of people. And it's, you know, it's not on the sturdiest ground. And therefore people feel this great sensitivity about, you know, keeping it afloat.
Sam,
I mean,
say a little bit more about what you said in your tweet about America being despicable. No, I'm actually curious to what extent you think America is actually bad in that sort of way, or is how bad or how and maybe you'll take issue with even the kind of describing America as good or bad. What does that even mean? I guess we could unpack that as well.
Shadi's doing his best Jake Tapper impersonation right now, right?
Yeah.
With Al Sayed, right?
Well, I mean,
why do you hate America, Sam? Tell us.
Yeah. Like I said, I don't hate America. But I mean,
but do you think America is bad in some kind of
fundamental way?
Deep way?
Yeah. No, not really. But I do think it does a lot of bad things on the world stage. And I also think that a lot of the things that I find, you know, a little like embarrassing, you know, despicable, contemptible about America have to do with the things I'm critiquing about this compulsory patriotism and this sensitivity. Really, it's just kind of like we're on top of the world. We're the sorest winners of all time, and I find that to be, you know, a part of America. I think it's kind of a core part of American identity at this point, of being like extremely successful and wealthy, and being able to make our will, impose our will on the world, and nonetheless, it's a version of what Trump's psychology is, which is just, it's narcissism. It's like this overinflated sense of self, which is an effort to cover up a basic vacuity and lack of confidence and a lack of a center. And I find that stuff, you know, sympathetic. I am American. Like, I identify with that. I have some of those impulses in myself, but I don't like myself that much.
I mean, you know, the part, again, maybe this is just like because I come from a nationalism, or like just sort of like a born national, whatever, like since I was not born in this country, I find it, and I lived, I mean, I'm older than you, Sam, and I mean, I lived through the Iraq stuff as well, and it was particularly, you know, it was an irritating time to be alive, but
No.
but it But nevertheless, I guess I just fall back very simply onto now I'm an American, so this is my country, you know. So I fall back into a kind of more reflexive, like American nationalism in that sense, in the sense like right or wrong, it's mine, and therefore,
Yeah.
you know. So I guess I'm less torn about it. That like you know, because I feel like what you're describing, you said it yourself, but it's like nudge you a bit more. It is like a very American thing to be like even like thinking about this. So it's like the self-hating American, the self-hating
Yeah.
American that also wants approval. Whereas
Yeah.
I'm an American now. I don't need the world's approval. I don't care what the world really thinks of us. And of course we do bad things and we do great things. And it's like, okay, like any other country in that sense. I mean, again, I do think this country is incredibly distinctive and has all sorts of things.
Yeah.
Not just in its favor, but that really do set it apart from the rest of the world. But it's,
Yeah.
I'm just not like torn up about it in the sense that I think a lot of Americans on the left end up being more torn up about it, like
Yeah.
reputational stuff and, you know, what we do or don't do in the world. I sort of shrug about it. Yeah, I don't know.
I definitely don't shrug about it. But I mean, I'm not like personally, you know, in turmoil about this. I feel the way I do. I have the ironic attitude that is expressed in that tweet. I do love this country. I think it's does very many horrible things and has a kind of bad attitude oftentimes. But I do think that like as far as the left goes, I thought that speech that Mamdani gave on the 4th was a great version of, you know, leftist patriotism. And I think the sort of sources of the past that he was trying to lift up there were really appropriate. And I think something that was really interesting about it too was that, you know, he quoted Tom Paine on America being exceptional as a sort of a refuge, right? And I think a funny thing about where we're at with creedal nationalism is that obviously a part of creedal nationalism, which was sort of forged or like, you know, most articulated in the mid-century by immigrants, you know, who had been assimilated, is that creedal nationalism immigration is so core to creedal nationalism, to the understanding of what America is. And Mamdani is able to wield that version of American nationalism against the right because the right has completely abandoned creedal nationalism. I mean, they don't want it. I mean, just the basic definition of America being about an idea is something that they have total contempt for. And America is not about an idea. It's about a particular people with a particular religion and traditions that were forged really maybe even before the founding. And that's what the America is about. And I think that in a weird way, now the left is able to wield creedal nationalism against the right. And I think that's a good thing. I think the other contingency here is that during the Cold War and also in a kind of, second time as farce after 9/11, creedal nationalism really was and has been wielded for the purpose of like cohering the American nation and winning its assent to our foreign adventures, right? That's what the tough thing about having a people that's made up of all these different peoples is like, how do you make them want to do big things like invasions of other countries and so on? And so I think that in my sort of forging as a person of the left, creedal nationalism, and I think for a lot of people on the left, they associate creedal nationalism with empire, with America's foreign projects, intervention in war. I think that now, because of what the right has become, there's an opportunity for the left, and I think that's what Mamdani was doing in that speech, to kind of wield it in a different way. But I do think that's also the source of suspicion on the left, even of this kind of nation of immigrants version of patriotism, because in our lifetimes, and certainly during the Cold War, that mentality, the neocons were the most articulate kind of champions of that version of American identity, and the neocons did what they did.
But can I then like push, because I think this is what I'm coming into this conversation wondering. It's a question for both of you guys. Is if you know, if you reject, call it, creedal nationalism, and obviously you reject the kind of, knuckle dragging nonsense that the far right, or even like MAGA right at this point, is championing.
But I don't.
No, not you. I'm just saying, like,
Yeah.
if the left
If one
does, right?
does.
If
Yeah,
one
yeah,
does,
yeah.
if one does, what's left at that point? And that what I want to drive at here is, it's the one thing. I mean, Shadi and I talked about this 2 weeks ago, and I'm a little puzzled by the enthusiasm. Is the theory of the case that the United States is ready for class politics? Because that to me strikes me as it might be. I don't see it yet. I see the success of what's happening on the left, but I guess I'm still sort of filtering it through, the unfinished business of the fact that the dead wood was not cleared around the time of Bernie's run against, potential run against Trump, and it's still there, clinging on. So people are sick of what's there, but I still don't see American politics being ready for class politics. So, am I wrong about that?
Well, I'm not sure, but I just want to say, for one, that it's clear that Mamdani doesn't think that you can do away with creedal nationalism and forge a coalition for his politics.
Right.
And he's probably the most effective communicator that the left has.
Talented politician, clearly. Generationally
and so
talented.
He's obviously, I mean, it was amazing to me because I first saw the tweets about that speech from the right, because a lot of my feed is the right, like everybody's. And I thought, he must have done, I was worried. I was like, he must have done some kind of annoying, woke America is bad and always has been bad speech. And then I watched it and I was like, this is like Obama shit. And I thought it was really good for that reason.
Obama shit is good, though. That's what I'm also driving at, right? Like, I think,
I think it is. I think it is too. So I don't know. Are there people? I don't know that anybody who is really playing the game and not just, playing to win, is suggesting that America can do without, that the American left could do without patriotism altogether, or shit on its symbols and somehow cohere an identity based exclusively on class warfare. I mean, I totally agree. There's no way. And also the thing is, I think that some of these people who are a little bit more in the like LARPing the left of the 20th century, they look at what those people, like internationalists, leftists, said, that there was a working class that, went beyond the borders of nation states. And it's like, that politics doesn't really exist anymore. Like there's no socialist international. There's no way to like forge this. I mean, obviously, like in some respects, and certainly when I was younger, I hoped that there could be, but there isn't. There are many, many nationalisms, and there are relationships that certain parties can have across borders, and they can strategize together and they can do certain things together. But there isn't a communist international. There isn't a socialist international. So there's no internationalism. There can be an aspiration to be internationalist in your mindset, but there isn't an identity that can be forged on the basis of like world revolution. So I think that some of the problems with, like, I don't know, younger people or people who are coming to the left with a storybook idea of its successes in the past don't really understand that.
Revolution in one country. You could still go there.
Yeah. The Stalinists are the only clear-eyed realists in the DSA.
But isn't there a problem, Sam, though, that a lot of leftists are not like Mamdani, and they do seem to evince a kind of disdain towards America or American ideals, because maybe they associate America with capitalism. That's probably part of it. But if you look at the DSA left, there does seem to be some of that annoying wokeness that you just gestured at. And I think that
or self-laceration.
Yeah, the self-flagellation, this sense of, self-loathing or self-hatred. But even more broadly, if you look at the polling on American pride, that only about 36% of Democrats say that they're either extremely or very proud to be American, and that chart has been shared a lot on Twitter, and it used to be over 80% in the early 2000s. So clearly there is a problem here that has to be addressed, and it's good that Zoran is trying to give leftists a way to be proud of their country and a way to feel joyful and to have an affirmative vision. But do you think there is something more fundamental about a leftist critique that requires looking negatively at some of the core components of what it means to be American? If you associate America with a free market or traditional religion or capitalism?
I don't think it requires it. I do think it's the product of a set of historical experiences that these people have had. I mean, I was describing my own attitudes as the base on the basis of the particular historical experiences that I had, being really disgusted by compulsory patriotism when I was young. And I think that leftists, similarly, like a lot of these people who have gotten really, excited about the left in the past few years, have done it like over the Gaza issue, and about which they have the perspective that, the Biden policy and American bombs contributed massively to the death, which of course I think is correct. And so there is, but I think there's nothing like fundamental about American leftism that has to be disdainful of its symbols or its past. And I think the best American leftists are always finding the version of the story about American history and the history of the left, which is admirable and can mobilize those symbols effectively for our causes. I mean, obviously, Obama's was a very effective one. His 2008 coalition. I mean, like that was he won Indiana, right? I mean, right. And that story was about like onwards and upwards. It clearly did have this kind of leftist historiography about the civil rights movement and the kind of progress and perfecting the Union, but it was very effective, and people liked it because people like to feel good about the country. And I think leftists today have to do the same thing, and I think some people do a good job of it.
I think Shadi hit on something really important, though. He said, and I mean, I guess this is maybe then the question again to both of you: is there such a thing as a non-capitalist or post-capitalist America? Because there is something, right, that feels like ingrained to American self-conception that involves, basically, I don't know, unbridled. I guess that's where the rubber meets the road, is how much you bridle capitalism. But there isn't, there isn't a sense where you do get a sense. And again, I take your point. It's a lot of LARPing and it's a lot of online stuff that doesn't reflect the actual ground game. And Mamdani's, carefulness in messaging shows that, the best of the young upstarts get this to a certain extent. But to your point about Obama, right? It was all social progress. And in fact, it seems like a lot of the energy, again, correct me if I'm wrong, a good chunk of the energy here is like revulsion at the market, and we need to do something about the market. Not in this kind of sense, or is that overstated? Like,
I don't think so, honestly. In some ways, like I think that I don't think there's revulsion at the market. I think there's revulsion at inequality and wealth inequality in particular, and the perverting effects of wealth on our political system. I think the anti-oligarchy thing is the motivating impulse here. I'm sure there's plenty of people in the DSA who think we're going to have like a command economy in America, but I think not most of them. And I think even, like I was listening to Bhaskar Sankara on Ross Douthat, and he's a market socialist, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he thinks obviously you're going to need markets for the price mechanism, and for and ultimately you're going to need to have investment vehicles in order to make profit. So I think, I don't know, Bhaskar is Bhaskar, but Bhaskar founded Jacobin. So it's not nothing. And he's been in the DSA since before everybody else joined. I don't think it's antipathy towards markets. I think you can be, have antipathy towards capitalists without having antipathy towards markets as well.
I mean, what was that like? There's that book by that Brit who's a friend of, I think my friend Ben Judah. Was called like Fully Automated Luxury Communism. Do you remember
Oh
that book?
yeah, I remember that. That
Again,
seems like an artifact.
An artifact, sort of. But I don't know. Like the left is governing, but it's going through it in Britain at the same time. And like even the tensions right now that have thrown Starmer out. It's, I don't know. Again, I've not been in a while, and I'm just following it sort of at arm's length from the news. But it's generational. It's very much, I think, again, it's not like these people are communists, but like it's a, I guess what I put to you is that like the economic critique is more strident than the establishment is at all comfortable with. And I guess that's what I'm maybe gesturing at here. Not that the DSA are actual Stalinists, though I'm sure there are some among them, but like that in fact the instincts are still too far outside of the mainstream. Well, but again, Britain, they're not too far out of the mainstream. They're in governance. So I don't know. I guess that's my sort of I don't know, intuition as I'm watching this unfold right now. But again, I'm watching with great interest because maybe I'm completely wrong, and we're in for some fun.
Well, I think you were right when you said about the dead wood, and that I do think that there's still an enormous amount of the energy buoying the socialist movement that is primarily just like, we hate Democrats and the establishments in both parties. And these are the people who are, plausibly opposed to that, like that we believe them when they say they're really opposed to it. And I was thinking about this too, like before Bernie 2016, I would probably have been in the camp, even though I personally identified as a socialist, that our candidates are not going to identify as socialists, because that just seems like it puts you at such a disadvantage in America, given the Cold War and the formation of our party politics. We never, anyway. So I would have said, just as a strategic matter, we're not going to be social. We're not going to call ourselves socialists. Privately be socialists, but that's not going to be how it works. What surprised me, I was wrong about, was that something about the label, which proved to certain constituencies that you were willing to antagonize the party establishment, that you were willing to do something that seemed like crazy or like out of the ordinary, and that it sort of became, the label itself had less to do with its, genealogy and Marxist economics or even just anti-capitalist economics, and had to do more with the fact that you were calling yourself something that proved that you were willing to go real hard and antagonize the people who were so sclerotic and stuck in trying to wield power over the parties and over the country in a way that that a lot of people who were not socialists and probably still aren't didn't like. That's the other thing. I've just been wrong like so many times, out of sometimes an abundance of caution, and that's something that I have to keep in mind, because I am like instinctively and philosophically like some kind of liberal, so I'm often like, whoa guys, like let's be a little humble here, let's look to history, let's slow down or whatever. And then these people that I thought were unserious, get elected to Congress. And so people shouldn't listen to me anyway.
What else were you wrong about, do you think?
I think I was wrong. I think a similar thing with the Gaza issue, where before October 7th, and like certainly many years ago when I was, I was a member of my Students for Justice in Palestine chapter in the 2010s. And I was always sort of like, for the sake of, like, for politicians, like they shouldn't be like, saying, like, it didn't seem to make sense to me to make like BDS be a litmus test, because the people who were even potentially interested in BDS would be so much better than most of the people in positions of authority. And so they shouldn't like center their position on BDS or on Israel or Palestine at all, because that's such an toxic issue, which actually also at the time I thought was like a thing that I really cared about and other people I knew really cared about, but the country didn't really care about and would never really care about to this degree.
And just for listeners, BDS is boycott, divestment, and sanctions.
Yeah, and I just say that as like a synecdoche for like taking a very strong anti-Israel position. It's like if these guys all have to say they're two-staters, the occupation is illegal, like that's the best we could get if every Democrat was saying that kind of thing. And after October 7th, I was also very much like this movement, this Palestinian solidarity movement in America is going to be in really big trouble if people keep associating them with Hamas as such, and they don't do more work to kind of normalize this movement and make it, easier for politicians to take up their, narrow political aims within the American context. Like, it's going to be so much harder to get people to sign on to opposing arming Israel if people on the left, if we don't police our own and get people on the left to stop, seeming to be primarily Palestinian nationalists. And look, maybe we could have gotten more done quicker if the movement had, self-policed a little bit, and we could have got more people on board during the Biden administration. But it hasn't hurt the movement overall, the radicalism of its fringe, terribly, as much as I thought it would. And this issue has become like absolutely a litmus test for the left, progressive part of the Democratic Party. And my trepidation, my trepidatious attitude and trepidatious instincts were perhaps not right about that either.
Where do you come out on the whole Gaza is a proxy for a deeper set of commitments, and do you think it's useful for Gaza to be used as a litmus test in the Democratic Party because it gestures at a broader set of concerns and issues, that Gaza isn't just about Gaza, it's about being against the role of corrupt money in politics via AIPAC, for example. It's a way to signal that you're against the Democratic Party establishment. Do you feel that that's a good thing, that Gaza has become that kind of proxy / litmus test, or do you worry that it can crowd out other issues that are maybe more important or should be more important to ordinary voters?
I definitely think it's a good thing. Because I think the issue is important, and it does seem like the Democratic Party has moved enormously. Democratic voters have moved in a crazy way against Israel. Like, it's extraordinary. It's not up to me whether it's the central issue or not. And it being what it is, and it being kind of playing this role as a kind of as a representative issue, or kind of the issue that indicates what a person's beliefs are about a lot of other things, or their opposition. It's similar to what I was saying about the socialism thing. Like, I do think that some people on the left look at the Gaza issue, and if somebody's willing to really go hard on that, then it shows that they are willing to, challenge, say, Democratic leadership in Congress and in the Senate. They are willing to piss off very powerful lobbies and stuff like that. I think it's kind of like it happened this way, and it does seem to be the case that it is a not like incoherent heuristic for identifying people who are willing to be insurgents, populists, and challenge the dead wood.
I think the broader point here, just Demir, and
go ahead.
Just I know you want to jump in, but I want to really highlight this broader point, which I hadn't really thought of in precisely this way, which is moderation isn't necessary. That radicalism doesn't hurt a movement as much as we might think it would.
This is
Or
exactly
doesn't
what I
ha-
wanted to. This is exactly what I wanted to comment on. So it's a great setup.
Yeah,
Go on,
and
Shadi.
I'm a little bit surprised too because I'm sort of like you, Sam, where I want to self-police my own side and make sure that we don't sound too
It's such
crazy
an annoying
on
quality.
certain
They
things.
really hate us when we do that. But, yeah.
Exactly. But even like last year, after I was calling it a genocide, but I was counseling politicians and saying on Twitter, well, if you want to run for office, maybe calling it a genocide wouldn't be the smartest thing. But now we see how normal it is for Democratic politicians like Ro Khanna or Brad Lander, and of course Zoran.
I mean, Lander won that race by calling it a genocide.
Exactly, yeah.
I mean, he also won that race because he had a very deep connection to that, district. But I mean, that was the key distinction between him and Goldman.
Yeah, so it's really amazing, and that things that might have seemed radical just a year or two ago have become so normalized and been part of the mainstream discourse. And I think that should push people like me to say, hey, well, we have to maybe acknowledge that we're a little bit too cautious in the way we view politics, and that radicalism is effective. We live in
you sound like sometimes you sound like a Trump supporter. I mean, they actually say the exact same thing at this point. Not about Gaza, but like about. I mean, Shadi, you remember we had Ivan Krastev on a while ago, and he was like I think like February of last year, and he was early in identifying. I think like he was like, what's going on with these people? They're revolutionaries. They're not conservatives. They're literally revolutionaries, and they have a revolutionary mindset. These people being the Trump people, and so I mean, I guess that's the thing. I mean, I first wanted to like ask you, Sam, but now you both said it. It's clearly you're right in what you're describing. That like the caution you had about Gaza is now mainstream, but I wonder whether we should ask: is it because of the inherent nature of the issue that it's mainstream now, or is it also that just basically the Overton window has shifted in all sorts of ways, in ways that are in fact pushing us into a more like revolutionary mindset on both left and right? And maybe I'd praise your earlier caution in the sense of like there's principles and then there's society. And look, I mean, what is society, especially as we started this conversation? What is American society? What is identity? What does all this sort of mean? I still feel like we're careening off of something here. And again, Shadi certainly knows this, and Sam, you might intuit it. I like to bracket the question of actual justice on most things, and sort of like look at this in terms of where we're going. But I'm struck, just by both of you talking about this. Like, yeah, the Overton window was shifted by previously considered radicals, and now they're no longer radical. Okay, in those terms, I'm still nervous. And again, bracketing the question of justice and right, but like just sort of trying to take a look at the broader place where we find ourselves.
There is one exception, I think, to the radicalism argument, which is to say that on culture, I guess I would say that on social, cultural, and moral issues, that radicalism is not effective when it comes to things like trans rights or defunding the police.
Why?
I think those are still certain issues that Democrats have to tread carefully on to not alienate the broader electorate. And I think that's actually one area that Zoran and people like him have been smart. It's not to say that they're against trans rights, but they don't make those woke issues so central. So
maybe they're being too cautious, though. Maybe they're echoing the mistakes you guys made and not being bold enough and standing for principles early on. Human rights, motherfucker, come on.
Yeah, but this is where I think the polling is very clear that the vast majority of Americans don't want to defund the police. And
vast majority of Americans didn't like Palestinians before either.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess I wasn't necessarily universalizing this experience to like on every single issue, radicalism is the way.
No.
On these two issues,
I was just pointing to this idea.
I know.
Yeah, but go on.
It's definitely interesting, but I mean, I think we've seen it doesn't always work that way. And I don't know what the conditions are, what the distinction is between issues where it does work. It probably has to do a lot with actually just, how the movements, there's sort of like constituencies involved, or the, an enormous number of factors, honestly. I don't really know. So I wouldn't say that I'm not giving up my caution, trepidatious nature on every issue. But I don't know. Sometimes I have to just acknowledge that. I don't know. There's an enormous amount in American political discourse that's like, it actually has this like, family parental quality of like, or like it's inflected by age and maturity, and the position that seems like the mature position, the cautious position, is always the one that is taken most seriously in the halls of power, or on the mastheads, on the opinion pages and stuff. And sometimes those people are just as deluded as we see. You could be just completely wrong while imagining yourself being the adult in the room. And I try to take that into account.
But so no, it's a fair point. So look, politics is situational, right? Ultimately,
yeah, that's what I'm saying.
You see your opportunity, and then you go for it. I'm just counseling you guys not to be like, I was wrong to be too cautious earlier. Maybe you weren't. Maybe
the
Israel
and Palestine issue is obviously one of the contingencies and specific things about this, is that the right has also shifted enormously. Sure. And there's at least some of that's because there's an actual like anti-Semitic tradition on the right. And what Tucker Carlson is doing is very much kind of activating a older sort of old right Christian anti-Semitism combined with opposition to Israel, which just does change the nature of all of this politics and scrambles some of our expectations, and it makes it so the right-wing Zionists seem just as out of touch as the liberal ones.
Oh, the only thing, I haven't listened to it yet. I'm not sure I'm going to find the time or the patience to do it, but apparently J.D. Vance was for 3 hours with Joe Rogan and was sounding like a new dealer half the time about the role of unions and the importance of public sector unions and bringing all of that in. So, again, like I think, horseshoe theory is meant to just invoke sort of left and right anti-Semitism, but like there's a horseshoe happening here of like broad populism around it, which I find really fascinating or at least I find it fascinating that J.D. Vance maybe is so terminally online that he thinks that there's a place there, to the extent that which like a bunch of, activists on the left also think that there's a real place there. But that's, to me, is the most fascinating part of what we're living through right now, is to see whether either of them are right. And there's a new consensus forming about, I don't know, FDR kind of something, or something even more. I don't know.
But I think a lot of us have always sort of sensed this, that the sweet spot of American politics is economically on the left, culturally moderate or reasonable, and sensible and not invading foreign countries. I mean, if you can sort of combine
you're a JD
those...
Republican, then,
No, I think that's also where Bernie...
Sounds like it.
But that's also where I think, someone like Bernie is. I do worry, though, that that's not necessarily where a lot of young leftists are, who seem to me to be quite woke on the cultural issues. I don't know what your sense of that is, Sam, but there was that picture going around of a DSA meeting, I think in New York City, where like a quarter of them or a third of them were wearing masks before the smog. So it wasn't tied to the fact that the air quality was bad. They were just still in this old like woke moment of like COVID era. And there are still people who do believe in defunding the police, that prison shouldn't really be a thing that people go to. There are people who think that gender and sexuality and all of this is a construct that's malleable. I mean, there are still those kinds of positions that make me nervous, because I think those distract from the class. If the goal is to make the left focused on economics and class divides, then you don't want them to be too culturally woke.
Class, though,
'Cause-
again, just that concept. I mean, I think like Sam was getting at the idea of anti-oligarchy and inequality, but I think once you get class into it, I think that's where the left hits a roadblock, talking about it in those terms. But again, maybe I'm wrong.
I mean, what do you think about the tension between focusing on economics versus being
I feel like this is what we always end up talking about when I come on the show, is like wokeness and whether the left can get over it in order to win. Which isn't necessarily a criticism. It is a big issue. I don't know. I think the place where, I know this seems like a little bit of a cop-out, but the place where I put my hope is that it seems like the left has learned a lot of lessons from the era of peak woke. And candidates like Mamdani most of all, if we think of him as kind of the best, one of our best politicians, he doesn't do that stuff anymore. I mean, look, if there are leftists who are like, I'm a prison and police abolitionist and I love Mamdani. Mamdani is the head of an enormous police department, which he's, running and apparently running without an enormous amount of dissent, less so than, his progressive predecessor in de Blasio. So Mamdani is not, he's learned these lessons. And I think a lot of the candidates have. I mean, so I don't think my thinking about that whole issue is that it has to do with the sort of class and educational constituency that makes up the loudest and most present voices on the left, which is they're professional, highly educated people with actually like a different stake in the class conflict, and therefore
like almost false consciousness about it, right? Like
it's not entirely false. Like in New York City, you could see that these people who like are pretty well off are nonetheless still not able to afford what they could afford if they, would just move to Chicago or much less a smaller city. But I mean, I think that the attraction of cultural radicalism is greater amongst these people who have a basic kind of oppositional mindset or a feeling that the elites are wrong, or the country is doing something oppressive and exploitative, and their entry point into understanding that might be through identities that they have or people that they know who have those identities, which is not related exclusively to class exploitation. And so the professional class has a wields still an enormous amount of power on the left.
But so I mean, I
don't think that's the worst thing in the world, but
I'm perfectly good to not do more woke talk. Sam. So I mean, like I'm curious. How did you parse the whole Plattner thing? I'll just say again, no stakes in the game and the rest of it. It looked to me though that like they ran the numbers against Susan Collins and they noticed. I mean, okay, there was a lot of oppo coming. I maintain that, like, in a situation like Plattner's, you always have to think, what would Trump do? Trump would sue the woman and win the vote, basically. You know what I mean? Like, basically never back down. And the opportunity was there for him to be a fighter and say, I will keep going. My intuition is that they ran the numbers against Susan Collins and, it wasn't yet ramping up. We'll see, because the new guy is, a Bernie bro who also was pro-Trump in a previous era or something. Weird horseshoe stuff. I don't know. Talk to me about how you're looking at Maine at all. Maybe I'm like misrepresenting all of it.
I wouldn't underestimate, I'm sure the real politic had something to do with it, but I also wouldn't underestimate the fact that like his constituency, I mean, the funny thing about Plattner, which is maybe something else we should talk about, is that he wasn't really winning over some new independent, more conservative, more male coalition.
Correct.
He was basically winning over the Democratic constituency, and that included an enormous number of women. And so the particular issues that he was being criticized for, and people who had dedicated so much. I mean, people who were into him, who were Democrats, were really into him, and they really believed in him, and they had invested an enormous amount in his moral authority and his campaign. And so the things that came out were really upsetting to those people. His most loyal constituents, many of them. So the
It's
Trump
worth noting
thing wouldn't work. Trump thing
Yeah.
wouldn't work
Right.
because
Right.
women who were a core constituency for him didn't want to, vote for, much less, get out the vote for this accused rapist. So I think that's a big part of it. And this is where you're
Cynicism.
admirable and often very helpful in a dialectical way, willingness to completely silo the moral good questions. Democrats aren't mostly like that, especially Democratic voters in primaries. And so they take it very seriously that he did something wrong from their perspective. And that was serious. I think that was a serious concern.
I mean,
isn't the broader issue also, though, that, Derek Thompson shared this stat the other day that if you look at the leftist candidates in a number of different races, whether it's Zoran, Graham Plattner, Abdullah Sayed in Michigan, they just don't do as well with so-called working class voters, that despite all this effort put to presenting themselves as being in line with the working class, actual real life working class people don't go for them. And then there's also the fact that Black Democrats don't go for them. So like on two major core constituencies, the left-wing candidates really seem to struggle to gain traction. And I think unless the left finds a way to fill in those gaps, especially among Black working class voters, they're going to face a kind of built-in kind of roadblock, I suppose. But I don't know if there's a solution. I don't know what the solution is to that.
Yeah, I don't know either. I mean, I think the interesting thing about Plattner is that he was a proposed solution to that by just being kind of a butch guy.
Yeah.
The people who recruited him were like, oh, we're going to win conservatives or independents or whatever because this guy isn't, like me, like a kind of fey leftist, overeducated person.
He's charismatic though too.
And he's extremely charismatic.
Yeah,
no, I'm not saying it's nothing. He was incredibly charismatic. I was very excited about him as well. But I think there's a funny thing that goes on with that aspect of the left's like candidate recruitment in the Plattner mode, which is that it does come from actually a kind of place of condescension, imagining that like independents who actually have more conservative views about culture or whatever wouldn't be able to see Plattner and know that he's a leftist. Like he really is on everything, and so there's a little bit of like a zoological approach to the independent or conservative electorate that imagines that they'll just go, oh, that guy's like, he likes to hunt or something, as if they don't actually care about, the actual issues, which I think many people do. I think that kind of like vibes-based candidate recruitment it can only go so far. And in this case, I mean, it's almost like a Shakespearean thing where they're like, we need a butch, real man to, as a Trojan horse for our left-wing politics. And it turns out like he has a lot of and appears to actually have a lot of the traits that are actually toxically associated with masculinity. Like it was really like a purely almost, if it wasn't so sad, comedic
I
reversal.
Just on the, my stupid little, always do what Trump does in these situations. I mean, obviously, I take your point that Democrats wouldn't go for it, but the only reason why I like say that as even a plausible thing is that if he didn't back down, Democrats would have nowhere to go. They could run a third party candidate, but he had it, right? Like by the laws and everything, he had it. A, B, he's very charismatic. And I think those are ultimately, leaves Trump's barbarity and sexism and all of it aside. He's a deeply charismatic guy who is bullheaded. And I do think that ultimately, you said people do care about issues. Of course they do. But I do think that like if you get someone as charismatic as Graham Plattner was, who is willing to just bulldoze through it, through all of these things. I don't know, like
yeah, well, I mean, I think it would have worked if he hadn't either raped someone or someone felt that he had. Like it's like
Fair
that's. I mean, I the other thing about Plattner, I have to say, is anybody who's still kind of defending him, obviously not what any of us are doing, but like, he knew that this woman thought he had raped her.
Yeah.
So when they ask him, is you the right person for this? Like, should you do this? Like, do you really think you can do this? Like, is there anything more? Even the first case, anything, and then anything more? He knows. I mean, it's unbelievably irresponsible and maybe actually representative of some of the bad qualities of Trump. This kind of narcissism,
the healthy narcissism of a successful politician. That's right.
Yeah, and total indifference to its potential negative impact on the rest of the party or the movement, or I mean, even his chances of winning. I mean, that he shouldn't have agreed to it if he was a remotely responsible person.
But to then just ask the other question, which is the opposite of what I was saying here about charisma. I mean, was there nothing to this, again, I guess, scuttlebutt that was going through the media around the time when they were going after him, that, the chips being down and all the Oppo research aside, like the message wasn't connecting with Susan Collins voters? That, I mean, I've been seeing a lot writing that Susan Collins is like a remarkable retail politician and it's going to be a haul for anyone to do it. But
can they possibly think that they'd be better off with somebody that they're just having to introduce them to at this point? I can't imagine they can actually have thought that.
No, that's fair.
They're just trading them out at this point would be, a safer bet.
Right.
If that was the main reason.
Yeah. And what's your take, Sam, on the fact that blacks in the party are kind of temperamentally conservative? They
Very
don't
conservative.
They don't
Very
appreciate radicalism
electorate.
or revolution, even though you might think that they'd be more sympathetic, but they clearly aren't based on the polling and who they actually support in these primaries. And that can
I think the other part of it is that the Democratic Party is largely a hollow apparatus that doesn't really serve as a machine or particularly good at like organizing, having these kind of like constituencies and blocks that they can mobilize. There are a few places in this country where the Black church and Black community organizations continue to play that role in a way that's actually kind of out of step with the rest of the Democratic Party. And those people and those places are very important in the Democratic primary nominating process. Obviously, Clyburn is the main example of this, but like also in New York City, there's a lot of that. And I think that there's a sort of weird way in which like the vestiges of like the civil rights organizational capacity is still there within the party in a way that for a lot of other issues it's not, and those or a lot of other constituencies it's not, but the people who are in charge of them are conservative, and a lot of the voters who are still mobilizable are conservative too. I think these are just all realities. I mean, I don't know how I think it's something for the Democratic left to work on, but I think those are it's just true. I mean, I don't think you can. I think it's really bad when people say like Black Americans are temperamentally, all of them, very conservative, because I think you should look at these particular institutional and organizational and historical circumstances to make sense of it. A lot of Black voters don't vote. And, that's not a solution for the left, because the left hasn't been particularly good at doing, except for Mamdani to a little bit with South Asian vote, but and the Muslim vote. But for the most part, the left hasn't been able to do this thing of bringing all these new voters into the process. But I'm just saying, I think it's a reality. It's a challenge. I don't know.
So as we sort of like wrap on this, how optimistic are you overall? I guess I'm it's been sort of a free-flowing and loose conversation.
Is it usually more structured than this?
No. This is actually a very tight conversation for us. But I feel like we've been pushing you into this sort of like
this thing I hate to do.
This thing you hate to do. It's kind of like, I don't know, reflection, maybe, like asking you to defend things and things like that. Are you optimistic about the left's chances? Like, is this a historical moment that will transform the Democratic Party, maybe transform politics in the United States? I mean, Trump's already done his part for transforming politics in the United States. Is it the left's turn to do its part? How are you thinking about things?
I mean, I'm temperamentally not particularly optimistic about the left ever. But like I said, I've been wrong. I think one thing that I do keep in mind is that, like, I say this a lot, but like when I became a socialist when it was a pathetic, embarrassing, like, terribly unchic thing to be. It was like being a model train enthusiast to be a socialist. You say I'm a socialist. It's like, oh, do they still have those? Like, what the hell is that? And then a few years later, Bernie Sanders ran for president, and all the cool, beautiful people I knew were socialists also. And that was incredible. I never would have imagined that would happen. And things like that do keep happening. I'm extremely, I mean, I've made this clear. I'm extremely happy about the Mamdani candidacy and the Mamdani, so far with his term. And I think the maturity of leftist candidates, insofar as we take him as an example, has improved. And the political skill has improved enormously. So I'm from the standpoint of where I thought we would be 10 years ago. I'm very grateful and happy. I would have bet 10 years ago against the left, and certainly I would have bet before Bernie against socialism as a running, an operative movement, as a growing concern. I was wrong about that too. So yeah, I'm hopeful in some respects. And I do think that the thing of the unfinished work of 2016 and the fact that, Damir, you won't like this, but like the right had its populist insurgency and it succeeded and it changed the party, and the left didn't have theirs, or the Democratic Party succeeded in preventing it from happening, a revolution prevented. And that means that and I do think the Democrats need to have that happen to them.
For the record, we don't disagree. I'm just worried about it, but I think
I know you're worried
right.
about it. Yeah. But so there's that's still that is still a growing possibility. And the other thing I look at is that, I think every viable candidate for 2028 on the Democratic side obviously is going to talk about affordability, inequality, and probably, frankly, Gaza. And that's unbelievable. And I do think that is due to, in large part, the effective organizing of people who are more optimistic than me.
But I think we should be careful not to assume that the Democratic establishment will go down without a fight.
Well, for sure not.
They're going to fight back. They are fighting back hard, especially in Michigan.
Did you see Jake Sullivan just did a mea culpa on Gaza and trying to squirrel his way back into the good graces of Shadi Hamid and the new insurgent foreign policy thing?
Is it persuasive?
Are you persuaded, Shadi?
Obviously not. Yeah, but that is heartening, though, that someone like Jake Sullivan feels a need to move on Gaza and to acknowledge that he was wrong in some way. I mean, that's better than the alternative of not saying
like
it
Kamala
at all.
Harris is calling Mamdani for advice about how to.
But these people have to stay purged, though, right? Be with me here,
Sullivan,
guys.
for sure.
Sullivan,
Kamala
doesn't
need
to be purged. Yeah, purge those two people, right, Shadi?
Absolutely, yeah.
Purge.
Yeah, Yeah. I mean, purge is maybe a strong word. I mean, I liked what Zoran said in his interview with the New York Times about making sure that the Democratic Party stays a big tent party, and that he'd even be willing to work with AIPAC supporting Democrats. So he was being pushed on that. Like, would you work with AIPAC supporting candidates? And he's like, yeah, if they're Democrats, they're members of the party, we all got to work together. So he's really, I think, striking the right tone on that. That we shouldn't necessarily purge these people. Should they be sidelined? Yes. Should they play a secondary role in the party? Yes. But they can still participate, I think, ultimately. But I do think that Michigan will be really important, because I think that's the battleground where a lot of these tensions are coming to the fore. And, you have a young, charismatic Muslim candidate.
Yeah.
And if they're able to kind of defeat his candidacy through tens of millions of dollars that are coming in through AIPAC, I think that will be seen as a victory for the establishment, and that will really take out some of the momentum that the left has been having.
Or
don't you think it's?
Yeah, go on, Sam.
I was just going to say, this is just kind of a joke, but don't you think it's kind of amazing that they're depicting a Rhodes Scholar epidemiologist as like a dangerous outsider in the Democratic Party coalition? I guess he's Muslim, but he's otherwise like
as Jake Tapper teaches us,
as elite can go. Yeah,
he refused to condemn the menace in Iran and the eternal war that we must fight against the Persians. So that's the ultimate sin.
So, well, good. I mean, I think we ended on a relatively optimistic note from someone who is not temperamentally optimistic about the left. But I think we really will see a battle between these different factions, and the left now is rising. It's powerful and it feels powerful. But I have a feeling that there's going to be a lot of resistance going forward, that these things just don't come easy, and the left will have to fight it out. And so, the cliche is time will tell, but we will probably find out pretty soon what all of this looks like. 2028. Will there be a candidate who is left sympathetic or more progressive versus someone who's more establishment coded?
I think we should, Sam, we'll have you on before 2028, certainly. But like, I'd like to maybe just like put a marker down on this and see if there are corrections to be had after the midterms. That is, like, if Al-Sayed doesn't pull it out, I'd be interested to talk to you guys whether it's time to redouble efforts because the dead wood must be purged, or whether the conclusion is that the wood has life in it still, and it's time to sort of, I don't know, adjust and adapt. I don't know.
Yeah.
Feels all like right. That's the question.
I'll come back.
Zach, talk to you in a year or so. Thanks.
Thanks so much,
guys.
Sam.
This is genuinely very fun.